Now, black people are lazy, and Africa would never progress without the help of white farmers. By the time we finish with today's conversation, maybe you will agree with both of those statements or disagree with one of them. But before that, let's take a look at this video together. Beautiful. Now, I think definitely just by watching that, you can tell this is a very, very beautiful event. People are happy, jubilation, and this is the return of Zimbabwe, a famous farmer, Robert Smart. Now, if you do not know the history of Robert Smart, he had been chased away from his land so that one of Mugabe's friends, who in this case is Trevor Manhanga, would be able to occupy that land. And in this specific event, he's just returning after now the president, Emerson Mnangagwa, had ordered that they be given their land back. And you can see the community, it doesn't matter whatever is, people are so excited about his return. And even this man had a lot of things to say in regards to the return of Robert Smart.
Now we are all happy because the community was gaining from Mr. Smart. So I would like to say congratulations to what actually has happened.
Great. And now let's just play now the clip of another woman welcoming Robert Smart and reminding him about the jobs, and also the family of Robert Smart, saying how excited they are to be back in Zimbabwe and why they still consider Zimbabwe home.
Jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
100%. People were missing that.
Yeah. Yes.
And we are so happy about it.
Yes.
And I think you're going to fulfill what the people were missing.
As always.
Thank you.
As always.
Beautiful there. Thank you so much. Now let's listen to Robert Smart's family, what they have to say.
I know my wife and my children are going to be ecstatic of what's happened today, that we be back, actually back in our home again. Words can't describe, but I'm happy to be back in my home. I know there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of theft that's happened, but I was expecting that anyway. But I just can't wait to get back in a day or two's time and start sweeping up and moving back in and to get the farm going again.
Great. Huh? Now, the reason I played that video is because this forms a very important part of our conversation today. And to be able to understand what people like Robert Smart have gone through, or how they found themselves in such situations where they were chased away from their land, it's very important for us to take a look at history. And in today's conversation, we are going to use Zimbabwe as a case study, because this is an example so many people use when they say that when white farmers exited, Zimbabwe collapsed. I'm going to start by reading you a couple of comments, and then it's very important for us to go back to history so that we can be able to understand how did Zimbabwe find itself here. All right, let's start from this comment from Wendy, and she said, today Zimbabwe is begging for the white farmers to return and are paying them or their families compensation. That's the most important lesson right here. Other countries should learn from this. Our best farmers are living in thousands and enriching countries like New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. The way ahead, starvation, unless we wake the F up, right? Let's go on and read another comment here. This one is from Carl Love, and they said Zimbabwe confiscated the land from white farmers who were very proficient farmers and who grew enough crops to feed the nation and export produce to other countries. They were an asset to the country and contributed to the GDP of Zimbabwe. When the land was turned over to black owners, the agricultural production went way down, not even growing enough to feed the people of Zimbabwe, much less enough to export and contribute to the country's economic success. The same thing is happening in the country of South Africa. Allow me to read you one last comment here. Neria said, well done to Zimbabwe. They can see without white farmers, the people are suffering. I hope South Africa learns from Zimbabwe that greed gets you nowhere and stupidity is a cause of farmers losing their farms. I mean, after watching that video and after going through some of these comments, you would say, of course, absolutely. Zim messed themselves up, and that's the reason they are where they are today. And we will be talking about a lot of things, including the Mugabe controversial land reforms, right? But just by watching that video and just by going through that footage, seeing Robert Smart coming back home, jubilation, and people so excited, telling them how they missed him and how they are gonna bring the jobs back, you would definitely say there's nothing wrong with this, right? But for us to be able to put this in the right context, we must go back all the way to history so that we can understand when black farmers say we want our land back, and white farmers when they say we were born here and we actually took care of this land and we've been providing for the people of Zimbabwe, then it's our right for us to be in this specific place. So for us to be able to understand and put everything in context, allow me to take you back to the 1890s so that we can be able to just understand a bit of our history. Now, if you go back to the 1890s, this is when the British colonizers, especially under the leadership of Cecil John Rhodes, they invaded Zimbabwe. And they did not just invade Zimbabwe. They did not come and say, knock, 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 we are here. Hello, can we coexist together? Can you move over? Give me maybe a small piece of your land. No, they violently invaded Zimbabwe. And by violence, we mean they went all in. They were using weapons, they used land trickery, so they had people signing treaties, etc., etc., and they made sure that they were going to displace. They actually took over, and this is the case in majority of African countries, including Kenya, where when the British came in, they went and they took over the White Highlands, right? So because we are using Zim as an example, they make sure that they displaced the indigenous people of Zimbabwe. And the indigenous people of Zimbabwe, we are talking about the Shona and the Ndebele people. So you find people coexisting with each other, people calling this our ancestral home, and you decide, you know what, we are going to take over this place. And not only are we going to take over this place, we are going to violently take over this place and make sure that we are occupying majority of the fertile land in this place. So they pushed the natives to the least productive areas. And then obviously 1890s, Zimbabwe is getting colonized under the leadership of Cecil Rhodes through the British South Africa Company. And 1930, we come to the Land Apportionment Act, which actually reserved 51%, get these numbers right, 50 to 51% of the fertile land in Zimbabwe for 5% of the white settlers. So you are having half of the country reserved for 5% of the white settlers, which means now the 95% of the indigenous people, they were told, you know what, you go figure yourself out, go to the least productive land. This is an act already, so this is legal, and we are going to reserve this land for the 5% of the white settlers, right? So what happens next? After they pushed the black Zimbabweans into the native reserves, you know, as we said, with poor soil and low rainfall, the result, obviously, there is massive inequality. You don't feel home. Someone is sitting in your ancestral land and there's nothing you can do about it. And even to make it worse, they are making you work in this. You know, like sometimes when I go back to history, I wonder how our ancestors coped. I wouldn't want to imagine the pain they must have been going through, just knowing I've called this place home for such a long time, and now someone is sitting or someone is building a house right where we've buried our ancestors, and they don't care about it. So there's massive inequality, and obviously they were locked out. So in 1980, if you remember, this is the time that Zim now is gaining independence in 1980. By the time Zim is gaining independence, you have 4,500 white settlers owning 70% of the fertile land in Zimbabwe. You see, all the way from 1890, the entry of Cecil Rhodes through the British South Africa Company rules Zimbabwe. In 1980, when they are going through the independence, you can see the massive inequality that is happening. You have 70% of the fertile land being owned by 4,500 people. So the 90% of the population who are blacks, obviously they were farming in these marginal lands. And again, as I said, I cannot imagine what our ancestors were going through. So you would expect, because Zim has gone into independence, this is 1980, independence means we are free. When people say we gained independence, but we did not gain the freedom of course comes with knowing, hey, we are independent right now. How about you live? How about you go and leave our farms and you exit and you go back to wherever you came from, right? Because finally we fought for this independence. So we are free people. And we would expect immediately you agree to this, that we are independent, leave our country so that we can again start from scratch. But if you go back, of course, this is 1980. If you go back to 1979, you remember when we were studying history, you have the Lancaster House Agreement. And what did it say? It prohibited the people in Zimbabwe from taking over white land for 10 good years. So for 10 years, you have independence, but what you are not going to do, you are not going to displace any white farmer from their land. And of course, you know, independence has been so romanticized. Yeah, you guys were independent. It's okay, we can come together. Let us strike a couple of deals here. Willing buyer, willing seller. You have Britain agreeing to fund a land redistribution process. And now the natives of Zim, they can start seeing progress. You have about 3.5 million hectares of land being bought and people being resettled again by the Britain through the land redistribution project. And then you have a lot of, you know, tens of thousands of black people here. They are gaining access to land, and this feels like freedom. This is independent. Even if we have to wait for 10 years, at least we can be able to see some few progress here and there. But what history also teaches us is that only 20% of the fertile land was redistributed. So, of course, we are going to give you land, but we are also going to keep 80% of the fertile land to ourselves. Willing buyer, willing seller. So, eventually, what happens? You have Mugabe and his black elite friends. And you remember we mentioned the one that took over Robert Smart's home because he was Robert Mugabe's friend. So you have these black elites taking over massive blocks of land. And now the people who fought for this independence, the war veterans, they are looking at it like, wait a minute, were we not supposed to be at the forefront of getting the fruits of our labor? We fought for this country. And I kind of feel like this is where African leaders failed the black people. When it came, and this is also very, very similar here in Kenya, you will notice only a few black elites in this country own land, huge chunks of land, because freedom demands that if people fought for this freedom, why don't you redistribute this land equally? This is what majority of the African war veterans, the Mau Mau, this is what so many African people died fighting for. They are fighting for their soil, they are fighting for their land. But the presidents who took us to freedom, they also had their own cahoots of black elites. And now you have people coming over and taking land and men. Even if there is willing buyer, willing seller, they don't have the money to buy these huge chunks of land. So you go redistributing this to your black elites, and obviously you feel betrayed and lied to. And Mugabe now, his support obviously started declining because people now started seeing, I don't think we were fighting for the same thing. I think you were fighting for your friends and your stomach, but you assured us, you kept telling us that, you know what, you are fighting for justice. And now, as we are approaching 2000, and this is now where we put where we connect the Mugabe's controversial land reforms. But before we get there, we are approaching the year 2000, and Mugabe's, as we said, his popularity is declining, and he needs something. He needs something to keep telling people about. He needs something to win support, because he's losing out on a constitution referendum first time. He is the MDC, now that is the opposition party, is gaining popularity, and he's definitely somewhere being scared. He knows, you know what, I think I might be losing here. And so what does Mugabe do? Man, this guy decided to come up with the land reform agenda, and he encouraged the war veterans to go attack white farmers, take ownership of the white farms. And it was just crazy. They started taking land without compensation. I think we all know how that went down. A lot of deaths, a lot of people even flew away from Zimbabwe, and you're having all these white farmers being displaced from their land. And then, of course, when you take over a white farmer's land, please, it's not the white guy who was working in that land. He might have been supervising, but he had the natives working in that land. And later on in this conversation, we are going to see the percentage of the black people that were working in those particular farms. So you have obviously a lot of people losing their jobs, but also in this other side, there is a win. Black people are feeling empowered. They finally, here is a moment for us to take our land back. MDC is fighting it, the opposition party, but the war veterans, of course, they are, they are ready to take over, whether we are going to use force, whether we are going to have to unalive some people. Our time has come, man. It's our time to eat. So exit and let's finally resettle in our land. And obviously, when this happened, black people are gaining some sense of dignity. You have ownership of your land. There's that decolonization aspect. We are no longer colonized. And you have almost 30% of Zimbabwe land now being redistributed to black people. A win is a win, right? Because this is what we've wanted for so long. What we've wanted is land. Mugabe starts gaining popularity once again from some few people in the country, but also there are people who can see this is not right. A lot of people are dying, and Ikitu, it's not planned. This is not a well-calculated move. But again, politicians will do whatever they need to do to make sure that they stay in power. So obviously, as we said, that feels like freedom, but so many things again went wrong. And one of the things that went wrong, as we've said, there were the black farmers who are working in these white farms. Obviously, when we watched that clip of Robert Smart, him coming back and people are clapping for him, those are his workers. The man who spoke in that video, that was his security guard. And they are like, come back, because with you, we know we have jobs. So you can't take away the aspect, and you can't take away the truth that some of the natives were really benefiting from these farms, right? But you've given me 10 hectares of land. what am I going to do with it? If I don't have the support, and remember they also burnt a lot of farms, if I don't have the support, if I don't have the tools, and also remember Mugabe's government had not put up a backup infrastructure, where are we going to export these things? Who is going to buy from us? What happens after we take over this land? What happens? Do we have a plan? And the truth is Zimbabwe or the government did not have a plan. So again, we take a look at sanctions being given to Zim left, right, and center. They were taken off Commonwealth, and people, the international community, was really opposed to what Mugabe was doing, because even the war veterans who thought they would benefit from this land redistribution process, or this controversial land reform, the Mugabe controversial land reform, they did not. But what happened is some of his friends, again, as we said, and we're going to take a look at some of these people, the inner circle, these are the, army generals, the ministers, they grabbed these prime lands, and one of them is Emmerson Mnangagwa. He served as the Minister of Defense and later the Prime Minister of Zim, and also now the President, right? So he knows what he did. These are the elite people who benefited from this land reform. Savia Kasukuwere, this is a prominent politician and a member of ZANU-PF party, Minister of Local Government, Rural and Urban Development, and also the Minister of Environment, Water and Climate then. He benefited, again, Mugabe's friends only. Lastly, you have people like Gideon Gono, who was the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zim, benefited massively from these land reforms, right? And then again, so you have people who are benefiting, and then you have the violent evictions, where you have people also dying left, right, and center. I mean, this is not the Zim we wanted. This is not the Zimbabwe. This is not the free Zimbabwe we were talking about. So obviously, chaos left, right, and center. And obviously, the food security crisis in Zimbabwe. Remember when people were making jokes that for you to be able to buy a bread in Zim, you have to have money in a wheelbarrow, because it's not enough. Whatever you can carry using your hand or your wallet is not enough to be able to get you even a piece of bread in Zimbabwe. We talked about the sanctions, and also we talked about the people fleeing from Zimbabwe. Almost 3 million people flew from Zimbabwe. So there's no profit in chaos. And sometimes I know this, you deep down you think this is the only way you can be able to get results. But if this move is not well calculated, what it does, it's going to harm the people, because you, the elite, you've already benefited. So there's no way the people on the ground, the common people, were going to feel good about this, right? And the aftermath, as we all know what is happening now in Zimbabwe, the year is 2020, there was the compensation deal where Zim agreed to compensate $3.5 billion to displaced white farmers, but not for the land, but for the improvement of the land. $3.5 billion. Damn! Let that sink in. I think they've only paid almost like 1% of that from 2020, but it's $3.5 billion, not for the land, because the land is ours, but for the improvement of this land, right? The infrastructure, the improvements. Of course, the white farmers had done a lot of things in those farms, and now the year is 2020, and Zimbabwe has to make amends, and it has to sign this deal where it guarantees the white settlers or the white farmers who lost their land $3.5 billion for the work that they've put in. And this is very controversial. So many people. And I have a lot of people asking, why would I compensate you for coming and improving a land that you stole from us, right? Why am I compensating you in the first place? What's the basis? What forms the basis of all this? I mean, the land is ours. You want to be compensated. Does it really make sense? You improved on a land that was not rightfully yours. And sometimes you will have the white farmers saying, we bought the land from the government. And this has happened to so many African countries where you have the white farmer saying, I am legally in this place. I bought land here, and these are my documents, and this is my title deed. This land belongs to me. And sometimes the treaties we were talking about, you remember the 1911 treaty where the Maasai signed a deal worth 999 years. They used tricks on the Maasai people to be able to sign those deals. But what can you do when someone tells you, I'm legally here? And then you have the generations of these white settlers who are telling you, I was actually born here. Yes, my dad might have gotten this land illegally, but I was born here. And Zimbabwe is the only place I know. And this is the only place I call home. I don't know any other place I can call home. This is the only place I can call home. So this whole topic of paying back the white farmers for the infrastructure and developing of the land is very, very controversial. But when we take a look at Zimbabwe, people have very different narratives. There are people who will say Mugabe destroyed Zimbabwe. He shouldn't have done that. They were headed towards the right direction, and the mess he caused in Zim might not, like, this is something that has full effect and impact on Zim. This is a point of no return. And then there are some people who say black farmers failed. They should have actually put in more work. They failed. They were lazy. They were so entitled, and they did not know what to do moving on. Even after they got the land, they did not know what to do. But also some people have different narrative. Mugabe was the only brave leader in Africa to spearhead such a movement. And some people might even say this is what all the presidents in Africa should have done. You know, let's have chaos for a minute, but let's make sure that we get our land back. Some again will say it's our land to begin with. We are not compensating you for, you know, this is our land to begin with. There's no compensation we are doing here. Go back to sender, go back to where you're coming from. And then obviously the most spoken narrative in all this is that Mugabe chased away white farmers who were feeding the nation. And that's not a lie. That's not a lie. I mean, if you are owning such a huge percentage of the fertile land in Zim, you are responsible for feeding the nation. Even if the small-scale farmers decide, you know what, maybe I can feed my family. But when it comes now to feeding the entire nation, you are the one with the highest chunk of land. So obviously, you are going to be the one feeding the nation. Now, back to the narrative. It's our land versus white people were the ones feeding the black people. And also the narrative, we were born here. Where do you want us to go? Let's go deep and take a look at these figures. So we spoke about the whole land reform before it came to power. Around 4,500 to 6,000 people, the white commercial farmers, they had occupied 70% of the most arable land in Zim, right? So this is almost 11 million hectares. That is 30% of Zimbabwe, because Zim, I think, is around 39.5 million hectares, thereabout. So this is almost 30% of Zim. They produced 80 to 90% of Zimbabwe's food, and we are going to take a look at the profit margins here and the income that this would bring. Say maize alone would bring around $200 million, right? Because they have the maize, they had wheat, tobacco, which was one of their main currency owner. They would get around $700 million per year. You have the beef, dairy. They produced quite a lot of it, right? But again, as we said, who was working in these farms? Yes, you are responsible for 90% of the food in Zimbabwe. Zim is actually considered the bread basket or the food basket of the continent, right? But the people who are working in this farm, not only are they neglected, but they are also being paid peanuts. You have almost 350,000 to 400,000 people working. So if it's 350,000 working, people, natives working in those farms. If I'm working in a farm, I have my family, maybe I have 4 children, I have my husband, etc. So the whole population of Zimbabwe that was working in these white farms, almost 20% of this population. So when we have the white farmers, who are the drivers? Who are the drivers of this success? And this is something I've noticed when people are talking about history, they love skipping, because we didn't have great agricultural machines back then. We didn't have. Right now, I know a farm, 10 acres, you have one great machine, it's going to do the work, right? But back then, even though the white farmers enjoyed benefits from their government, the loans, etc., but it's soil. We got to use our hands, people. And who are working in these farms again? The natives. So as much as we talk about successful white farms, we have to ask ourselves the most important question. Who are the backbone of this success? We cannot talk about the success of white farms without addressing the people who made that a success. And these are the black people. They are the black people who worked there day in, day out to make sure that you guys enjoy millions in revenue, right? But let's take a look at how much they would get paid. You are having people getting paid 30 USD per month. This is someone with a family. This is someone with their own children. You are giving them 30 USD. You have seasoned workers earning 20 USD per month. I mean, right now, even if you were to give me, and I know back then, of course, the money might have been a bit good, but you can imagine someone paying you 20 USD right now. What would you do with that money? Not much, right? So another thing that people don't love talking about is that even though the white farmers, they provided the basic necessities, the schools where some of you could take, where some of our ancestors or some of our parents could be able to take the children, but there's no job security. They can decide, I'm going to have you today, I don't need you tomorrow. There's labor abuses. Who are you going to report that to? I think the whole colonial period was such a mess for our ancestors. And maybe this is something they all, I don't know how they coped, but I can't imagine the strength they had to be able to cope with all this. You're being abused. So many bad things are happening to you, but you cannot go and report that to anyone. And even though they provide the school where you can be able to take your children, they are also making sure that you are highly dependent on them. But how are they benefiting? Some of them banked in offshore accounts, right? Because the money is not coming to develop Zimbabwe. I mean, if Zim was being developed using the white farmers' money, don't you think it would be crazy right now? Don't you think the infrastructure, the roads, etc., the buildings would be crazy right now? Because again, we are whatever it is you are earning when you export this goods, if you are bringing it back to the country, guys would have developed so bad. I mean, roads, the whole infrastructure in Zimbabwe right now would be crazy. So let's not lie to ourselves that the money came back to Africa. Their children were enjoying the best education in the best universities. I mean, you will interview some of these people and tell you how when they were 24, 25, they even had choppers. Their parents bought them choppers, right? So we are not going to compare these lives with the lives of the black children. We are not going to do that. Yeah, so they have the best life for their children, and also they have their children in very prestigious schools. And someone would also ask, why were there no black farmers? Because see, the land has been redistributed, so why are black farmers also not getting successful in this field? Of course, there were black farmers, the famous one being George Tawangwa Senior. This is a pioneer black business person and farmer in the 1960s. You know, he became the first black person to purchase a commercial farm, that is Zimdale Farm, around 1,800 hectares. And also he founded the Mushandira Palmway buses in 1950s and built Mushandira Palmway Hotel in 1972. So, of course, we have successful black people in Zim. There is also Paul Tangi. This is a nationalist and businessman who grew a lot of maize at Inyati Farm. And then there is Solomon Tawengwa. This is the son of George Tawengwa, who continued the family legacy in agriculture. And his family is one of the black elites in Zim. Again, as we are talking about black elites. But even if they are black elites, let's compare now the income. Then they would earn, say, around 500,000 USD to 1.2 million per year. That is what they would make. But you know what the white farmers would make? They would make almost 1.2 billion USD. Can you compare that? Like, there's no way you are going to compare that. Even if I'm a black farmer and I really want to give it my all, I'm at such a disadvantaged position because the white farmers, they are receiving massive support even from their own governments, right? And you can tell the disparity, and you can tell, you know, no matter what happens, we are never going to catch up with you. Even if we are the pioneers, we are nationalists, no matter what happened, we are never going to catch up with you. But let's take a look at some of the notable white farmers who were affected by this whole incidents. The famous Mike Campbell and Ben Frieda, these are the owners of the Mount Carmel farm in Chegutu. So Mount Carmel, you see, one of the most successful black people owns 1,800 hectares, right? But Mount Carmel is it's 12,000 hectares. Again, can you compare even the output? You wouldn't even compare that. So him and his father-in-law, they owned 12,000 hectares estate, and they were producing mangoes, maize, tobacco, etc. And of course, they went through the whole eviction notice, and they contested the eviction and took the case to the Southern African Development Community, and they, of course, it ruled in their favor, but the government ignored this. This was very famous. They ignored all this, and their home was invaded in 2008 and burnt down. The father-in-law, Mike Campbell, he died in 2011 due to complications from the injuries he sustained from the invasion, but Ben continues to advocate for justice and compensation. Ian K, who owned 5,000 acres farm, he abandoned the farm, and he said, you know what, yeah, I've been here 53 years, but it's not worth the pain. Let me go, let me relocate to somewhere else, right? And also you have Peter Hewitt. This is the owner of the Lorraine farm in Kwekwe. He owned 14,000 hectares, and also, despite being a ZANU-PF member of parliament, they said, you know what, you are still white, you gotta go. And they listed the land for acquisition without compensation in 2000. And then, of course, you have Bill Creswell. This man is now a very successful farmer in Mozambique, very, very successful. And maybe we can take a look at this video so that we can be able to see where is he right now.
We started initially very small, and we've grown. We now grow 12 hectares of horticulture. It doesn't sound much, but in terms of tonnage, it's quite big.
So looks like Mozambique is really giving these people great support. And of course, now there is also another person. This is Doug Stanley. He also left Zimbabwe for Zambia. Let's play this video so we can also be able to see how he's coping.
I bought my farm after independence, you know, and I got clearance from the government to say that they weren't interested in that land. And then you know, to be told to move along, you know, it's quite a thing. Eh? You do all that development, and it was my home.
So Doug Stanley, they are saying, you know what, that was his home. And the fact that they even bought this land after independence shows you how, I don't know, dishonest the government was. But let's listen in to another person here. This is Graham Ray. He also lost his 1,000 acres to a general in Zimbabwe, and now he's farming in Zambia. Let's see how he's progressing.
Obviously, it doesn't make me feel good because I know the potential of Zimbabwe. If it was a net exporter, it can return to be a net exporter. All it needs is a correct policies, and you'll be a net exporter. It's as simple as that. Let the private sector run agriculture.
Good. Here, Graham Ray is advocating for the private sector to run agriculture, but right now he's doing great in Zambia, but he really says, you know what, Zim has the potential to come back and be what it used to be, the breadbasket of Africa. But you would think if Zimbabwe got rid of white farmers, other African countries would be like, no, we don't need you guys here. But countries such as Mozambique, as we saw, South Africa, Zambia, they are really accommodative towards these people, and they tend to think, or they tend to know the value that comes with having white farmers in your own country. Let's listen in to Kakoma Calvin Kalei. This is the Zambia National Farmers, he's in the Zambia National Farmers Union, and this is what he had to say in regards to having white farmers leave Zimbabwe and come to start this whole process again in Zambia.
Let's look at what they have managed to contribute in terms of production. Wheat production jumping from 60,000 metric tons per year in 2009 to somewhere averaging between 300 to 420,000 metric tons per year. If you look at the contribution of the Zim farmers, massive contribution.
He's very passionate even when he talks about the contribution of the white farmers, and this might be the truth that we can't run away from, that yes, they have contributed regardless of the injustices that happened in the past. Yeah, they've contributed, and that's why countries like Zambia have no problem taking them in. But even as we talk about this, there are a couple of myths that we need to demystify when it comes to talking about black farmers. The whole notion and the idea that black farmers did not know how to farm is a lie, and this is a myth that we need to demystify. Black farmers have been farming for generations after generations, even before the colonial period. I mean, when you go back to Zim, the Shona and Dembele, how do you think they survived even before the coming of the white people or before colonization? How do you think they survived? Actually, it beats logic that some of the ways the black farmers used to farm that were considered and reproductive, those are some of the methods that people are now using, right? But people will not credit such methods as black farmers' methods or black people's methods such as intercropping, terracing, crop rotation, and following irrigation systems, right? Even Zim, even before in the before the colonial period, they grew sorghum, millet, and maize. Man, some of the most healthy ways that we grew up in, just eating those African foods before the white people introduced the cash crops that were not really beneficial to the farms of the black people. When you go back to West Africa, this is Mali, Ghana, you have the Yoruba kingdoms there. They grew rice, yam, kola nuts, etc. Right now, kola nuts or nuts are luxury, right? But these are things that the ancestors knew how to grow, and also they knew how to navigate their land. They knew this season we can't farm here. And you know, when it comes to Africa, land was definitely communal. Majority of the land was communal. So there was no strict ownership. As long as families got fed, then people were definitely okay. To say that white people taught Africans how to farm, it definitely exists to justify, you know, the colonial periods, land theft, the injustices. Because how are we going to talk about you teaching an African man how to farm and not address the fact that the land was not yours in the first place? And also, someone would say, you know what, even the white settlers who came in originally, they were not farmers when they came to Africa. Some of them, they became farmers through the opportunities, the land injustices, and the heavy state support. I mean, come and farm here, take over this land, we are going to give you all the support that you might need, right? Example, in Southern Africa, this is now the majority of these white settlers, they came from Britain. Britain, were they farmers really? really? Were they not adventurers, traders, missionaries, etc.? And they also enjoyed tax breaks from their own government, and they were given equipment loans. They were given free land. So how are you going to compare these existences? How are you going to compare these two different livelihoods? How, again, are we going to talk about your land, your land, your land, without acknowledging this was not my land, my land, my land to begin with, right? Now, let me read you also a couple of more comments, and then we are going to wind this up because I'm really interested in your comments on the same. Someone here said, how do you compensate people that stole the land from the start? Mugabe got it right. How do white people own land on all black continent? I know they took it by force or either stole it, right? Someone said, how stupid can someone be? Why would anyone pay the thieves for returning their stolen goods? Sorry to have to say it, but too many of my African brothers are jokers, playing the fool and expecting others to take them seriously and treat them with respect. No one treats fools with respect, only contempt. Hundreds of years of being treated with disrespect and contempt, and they've still not worked it out. Very shameful and vexing. That's someone who is disagreeing with this whole compensation. And again, this affects a lot of African countries because the white farmers are here. That is what maybe South Africa is struggling with. You want to take the land without compensation. Do you go ahead and do it? Or will you enjoy Trump's embarrassment by trying to do something like that? Again, someone here said, educated blacks will never sell fruit and vegetables. Even if you convince them that they can make $100 profit a week, they would rather go to workplace, which pays $200 per month just to speak English. My African people, what's up? Are we not okay being farmers? Do we still view farming as a poor man's job? Is it true what this gentleman is saying, that majority of you would rather be paid $200 in a month rather than earn $100 in a week through farming, simply because you want to work in an office and you want to speak English? Is that something that is really disturbing us right now? Andile said, there are some blacks who don't know that it's blacks who worked the land. They are called farm workers. Most of white landowners are absentee landlords. That time farm workers are part of the poor and poorest, with legally set minimum wages of around 3,500 rands a month, which is not even paid, right? That is someone right there saying, you know what, we keep saying these are white farms, but you are not acknowledging the people who work in those white farms. We spoke about that. I saw this comment in reply to someone who was talking about the Boers and why they should not they have every right to be in South Africa. And this person said, you romanticize Boer sweat when ignoring that the soil was stolen, the labor was forced, and the laws were rigged. Black people weren't lazy. They were legally barred from owning land. You are not defending farmers. You are defending a system built to keep others landless while praising the thief for tidying the house. Is that a true or a false narrative right there? Are we glorifying the white farmers and talking about how amazing they are, and then we tend to overlook the fact that this was not their land to begin with in the first place? Is that what we are doing? Let me read you the last one, and then you guys can also tell me what you think about this. When my grandfather went to Zimbabwe after the World War II to start farming, he had to clear the land and recruit laborers from Malawi because there was no one there. He and many others made the country into the bread basket of Africa. I'm gonna call BS on that. Just because you found a place empty does not mean you belong there. Is it okay if people go to the US or the UK, find some random uncultivated land, get their people to come and, you even got the laborers from Malawi. You got black people coming to clear that land for you. And now you are saying it's your grandfather who made the country into the bread basket of Africa. We are going to call BS on that one because we know that is not true. The land no matter how uncultivated it was not yours to start with. And that's a fact. And that's something we have to come correct with. And that's something we need to be open about. That's a fact. Just because something was uncultivated does not make it yours in the first place, right? But let me know your thoughts on the same. Very, very difficult but much needed conversation to have. People are saying, you know, black people are not lazy. Some people are saying, you black people, you've been sold this whole office narrative for so long. And also some of the things that we might need to ask ourselves. If a man farms with bare hands, well, another farms with tractors. Don't compare the yields, compare their histories. If someone is using their hands and another person is using the tractor, please stop comparing the yield, because it's not going to be the same. Compare their histories. How did we get here, right? Also, when the white farmers leave, I think the issue is not that they are white. I think it's that they leave behind systems that aren't replaced, because they set up those systems to benefit themselves, not the African person. So when they leave, it's not because they've left. It's the systems they live, and they know for sure these systems were designed to help us as white people. They are never going to help you as a black person. We don't need black farmers. Africa needs functioning systems that aren't replaced. It's not that black farmers can't do it, but they can only be successful if the systems favors the black person, right? So let me know what you think. I think white farmers are not the saviors. Black farmers are not the problem. I think the real enemy, again, as we spoke about, is a system that feeds one while starving the other, and also blames the ones who are starving for not being full. I think that's what's wrong. It's not that black people are the problem. It's the systems. It's the land injustices that even happened after independence. It's that majority of the presidents in Africa gave the land to their people and made it hard even for the people who fought for the independence to even gain a piece of land. We still have thousands and thousands of people who led us to independence that don't have anything in their name. So many people that led us to independence, and they don't have anything to their name. And that's a shame. And that's a shame. But let me know what you think. I know we used Mugabe here in Zim as an example, but I feel this is a story that resonates with so many black African countries to say, even if he took back the land, what Mugabe also forgot to do was to build systems that would make the land productive. That is what he failed to do. And of course, Mugabe's land reforms were revolutionary in principle, but they were also disastrous in execution. And that is something we have to be okay with. The impact will always be unforgettable. But I think the main question that we have to ask ourselves is, where do we go from here? What are some of the conversations that we need to have? Are we ever going to have conversations where the white farmers also admit that they got these lands illegally? And are we also going to have a conversation where the black people come to terms with knowing that the systems will never favor them? Leave me your feedback, your thoughts on the comment section. Someone recommended that I do this reaction, so I appreciate it. And I really want to know what your views also are in regards to the land injustices and the land reforms that have happened in Africa. My question to you is, where do we go from here? Let me know on the comment section. Share your genuine feedback on the comment section. And I also let me know, what other conversation would you have me talk about? It's time for us to start having these thought-provoking conversations around Africa, because I believe we have to be able to use our voice to make Africa a better place for the generations to come. Also, I appreciate all the new subscribers on the platform. I see you, I value you, I acknowledge you. God, you people have been absolutely amazing. So I appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing. And if you've watched this all the way to the end and you've not subscribed, please subscribe. It goes a long way into making sure that our work reaches a wide range of audience, right? If you are a fan of independent journalism, support our work. Our M-Pesa number is right there on the screen, and also you can be able to join our Patreon club. The link is also attached here on the description. My name is Lynn Ngugi. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you believe that Black people are lazy? Do you believe that white farmers taught Africans how to farm? And even if this had not happened to Africa as a continent, do you think our old ways of farming would still be beneficial to our people right now? Thank you to the team that put this work together. I appreciate you. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.